Warren Buffett says my favorite holding period is forever. So we tend to go into things with a very long-term mindset. And it doesn't mean we don't sell, but we don't have a mandate to sell.
Hospitality, multifamily, build to rent, mixed use, industrial, commercial, master plan communities. How the heck do you do all that?
My brother and I tend to be more generalists, and then we have sharpshooters in every field. I often say if you want great investments in great places, don't always look at the developer, look at the source of capital. Ultimately, the source of capital is going to decide what happens. What the community told you they wanted was to create the heart and soul of Denver. Your mission is to create the best of Colorado.
Welcome to the Denver Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today's guest is a great one. He is behind some of the biggest projects in Colorado. I'll say the most iconic projects, I should say, with one of them being Union Station, which is probably the most iconic place here in Colorado, with a lot of other projects as well. I'm glad to welcome Chad McWhinney to the podcast. Good afternoon, Chad.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk details with you because you and your team and your brother and your business, you guys have built an amazing portfolio. You've got an amazing journey out here in Colorado real estate. But before we get into the details of Union Station and other iconic projects, take us back to where you guys started, before real estate.
Sure. So I'm 54, and in 1991, started getting into real estate. Before that, in 1986, I think I was in 7th grade, and my brother Troy was in 5th grade. And we decided to open up a roadside strawberry stand at our grandparents' mobile home park near Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland in Southern California. And we would buy fresh strawberries from farmers and let them get picked where they were just perfect to eat. And then we'd rush them out to the street corner and sell them. And did very well. Didn't have much overhead, made good profit. And it was fun, happy customers, etc. And then eventually got two brothers involved in the business, and then grew that business from one location in 1986 to about 30 locations in high school.
So this went beyond just a middle school little stand. I mean, you got pretty scaled there.
Yeah, it was a legitimate business, paid our taxes and everything. And we also got into pumpkins and Christmas trees and things like that because we had the leases on the property. And through that process, we met real estate investors and real estate developers because they had excess property that we would lease from to put our strawberry stands on. And in the strawberry stand business, we generated good cash flow, but it was ordinary income. And then what do you think happened to the value of our assets over time? Boxes, equipment, trucks, and everything, they went down in value. And
sorry, how old are you when you were running this and realizing all this?
I was 7th grade when we started.
Right. And then when you got to what you said, 30
I was like 16, 17.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And you were already looking at ordinary income tax brackets and understanding all this.
Yeah. Someone gave me a book called The Buffett Way by Warren Buffett in the early 90s, and I read it. Dropped out of college after a week, and decided to come to Colorado, really based on an article that was written in Time magazine in the early 90s called Boom Time in the Rockies. And it said everyone's heading for the hills. It's going to be a wild ride in real estate. Denver Airport was under construction. Coors Field was under construction. I was, I think, 19 years old at the time.
So that article inspired you to look out to Colorado.
Yep. Yeah, I knew I wanted to be into real estate, but I wasn't sure exactly where to go. There was a little bit of family land that my dad had inherited in Loveland, Colorado, a small farm that he was going to sell. And I'm reading the Times Magazine article about everyone's coming to Colorado and he's going to sell this land. And I was like, I want to buy it. And so he goes, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you the land. He had to sell it to pay inheritance taxes. He said, I'll sell you the land on one condition, that you move to Loveland, Colorado and become a part of the community. And I was like, okay. So I dropped out of college and packed my truck up and drove to Colorado in early 90s.
But this was what, around 3,000 acres, right? I mean, this was...
It didn't start as 3,000 acres.
Okay.
The original farm was a few hundred acres, but you could buy other farms around it for about the same price. And so I remember starting to put options on different parcels of land. And the opportunity was, back then, farmland was, call it $1,000 to $2,000 an acre, which I didn't have much money at the time. But I'm a futurist by nature, so I could see the area was in transition. And I grew up in Southern California, where I watched it go from strawberry stands and orange groves to prime development.
Yeah.
And I said, this area is getting ready to boom. And so I would sit down with the farmers and say, hey, instead of $1,000 or $2,000 an acre, we will pay you $5,000 an acre, but we need time. We need time to get it entitled through the city. We need time to get some entitlements and planning done, stuff like that. And I remember,
So are these like no cash down options?
no, they were cash down options. We put down like 1 or 2% of the purchase price.
Okay.
Sometimes they would apply, sometimes they wouldn't apply. But I remember saying to my brother, put as many options on properties as you can. This area is getting ready to explode. And I remember he looked at me and he's like, how are we going to pay for it all? And I was like, I don't know, but like we need to get time because this area is in transition and it's getting ready to go from depressed agricultural land, the S&L crisis was in full force and effect, to prime real estate. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So we started putting options on land, call it May of 91. And a lot of those options we didn't have to close on for, 3, 4, 5 years. And by the time the options came due was about 1997. And we ended up 100% financing all of Centerra through Farm Credit Services of America. So we had no partners. And we were able to do a loan with Farm Credit Services of America. And we were able to do that because the land had appreciated. So we had a really good basis.
Okay.
And we could service the debt by renting out the farmhouses, farming the land, stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah. And that, I think, original loan, it was in 1997, is for about what became 3,300 acres of land.
Okay. And so when you started buying the land around there, did you have like the vision of building Centerra, or is it just, hey, we're going to grab this land and we know it's going to be worth something, we just want to land bank it?
Both. So it was, we had a vision to do a master plan community, and growing up in Southern California, there was a lot of planned communities that were done there. And I didn't know a lot about real estate, but I understood free. And what I mean by that is Warren Buffett says, never turn down free, never turn down a free lottery ticket or free option, et cetera. And so we were basically buying farms, and we underwrote them as farms. But I knew at some point in time the real estate development's going to catch up to this area, but we weren't paying real estate development prices. So I kind of said all the real estate upside when it comes, and I don't know if it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, but I was 19 years old at the time. I'm like, at some point in time in my life, this is going to be prime real estate land, and we get all the real estate upside for free.
All right, so you said you closed in 97?
We closed the Farm Credit Services loan in 1997.
Okay, 1997. And then what next? Like, where was the first phase, and how did you start building out Centerra?
The first phase was selling land to an outlet mall developer, and I think September of 93 is when they broke ground and opened in end of 94. That was a 100-some thousand square foot outlet center up in Loveland. And what really opened my eyes was, I remember when we were negotiating to sell the land to the outlet mall developer, he's like, hey, I want to buy 40 acres and I'll pay you $30,000 an acre. And the city helped extend infrastructure. And so it was 40 acres, 1.2 million. And I remember I said, hey, you got a deal, but instead of 40 acres, I want you to make it 41 and a half acres. And then I want to keep an acre and a half in the project, and maybe I'll put a gas station on it or something. And halfway through construction, he calls up and he's like, hey, leasing's going really well. Can I buy that acre and a half back? And I'm like, I don't know, what are you willing to pay for it? And I think we ended up agreeing on $425,000. And I was like, wait a minute, he bought 40 acres for 1.2 million, but then that pad was worth $425,000. And the wheels started turning in my head. I'm like, oh wow, like there's good investment to be made in this business.
That's a ton of value creation.
Yeah. I'm like, I should have made it 45 acres.
Yeah. Okay, so lesson learned from there. So did that change how you started working forward once you had that epiphany?
Yeah, I think in the early 90s it was kind of traditional subdivision stuff like that. It wasn't until really the mid 90s that things started coming back pretty strong in Colorado, and we saw the value of getting more land than just the original farms we were buying, and putting together a true master plan community. And so we had always considered ourselves part of the Loveland community, even though a lot of the farms we were buying were actually in unincorporated Larimer County.
Okay.
And so we decided to work with Loveland but then we also knew we had the opportunity to go to other cities with the land. But we went to Loveland first and said, look, our family's been part of Loveland for many, many years. We consider ourselves part of Loveland. We would like, instead of shopping this around, we would like to do a planned unit development with the city of Loveland, create a public-private partnership. And we basically did that. And in the year 2000, it was called the Millennium Edition. We brought in about what became, I think, 3,300 acres of land into the city of Loveland, part of the Millennium Edition. And it specified vested development rights, how infrastructure was going to be done, tax increment financing, urban renewal authority, and stuff like that.
So, I mean, kind of fast forwarding to more present day, like where does it stand today? What's built out? What's remaining? What's the remainder of the vision you have?
Yeah, so Centerra is about 6 square miles of land up at I-25 and Highway 34 in northern Colorado. We're about 50% of the way finished. And one of the reasons we've been able to develop it very thoughtfully is because we have a very low basis in the land. We don't have any outside partners on the land. And we're able to really take our time and do it right. We're not, we don't have a short-term IRR clock or something like that on us. And we also have a really great public-private partnership with the city of Loveland, which allowed us to do things in a very thoughtful way. And so we're about halfway done. We've got, I think when it's all said and done, we'll have 3, 4, 5, probably over 10,000 homes at Centerra, and probably over 10 million square feet of commercial development.
Out of all that, and I live in a master plan community. I live in Highlands Ranch. I understand them. I like them. I have a very basic understanding of them. But when you have all those acres, I know for that first one, you sold off 41.5 acres. Do you generally sell the acres, or are you now like developing yourself or partnering? Like, how do you parcel that out? And are you ultimately remaining in control, or do you sell that land to someone else?
Yeah, good question. So the residential development for sale, we sell those lots to builders. Yeah. So we basically create lots in partnerships with the builders, and they sell finished homes to builders or to the public. But
you're not building the homes; you're just selling the lots.
Correct, on the for sale, and then on the for rent and the commercial, we tend to build all of that for our own account. So be it apartments, medical office buildings, retail. We have Whole Foods under construction right now, et cetera. All of that we will develop and own for the long term. And then, we have public-private partnerships with the city of Loveland that go on many years, et cetera.
Okay. And so is this just kind of like a build and hold in perpetuity?
Yeah, our goal is, Warren Buffett says my favorite holding period is forever.
Yep.
So we tend to go into things with a very long-term mindset. And it doesn't mean we don't sell, but we don't have a mandate to sell. I think having a mandate to sell is just, you can get into problems. You could hit a GFC or something like that where values are down and you're forced to sell. Whereas most of our investors are accredited investors, high net worth families that are really investing generationally and for the long term. And so we're able to really focus on long-term cash flow, tax-deferred appreciation, depreciation, et cetera. I like to say you make it 4 ways in real estate. You got the appreciation, you got the depreciation, you have the amortization, and you have the cash flow.
Yeah. So a lot of your investors, and you guys are included, it sounds like just multi-decade type time horizon for a lot of the investments.
Yep. Now, sometimes we will sell, but it's usually because we got a really good offer.
Like it's too good to refuse type offers?
Sometimes that happens, or sometimes we have a better use for the capital somewhere else, or sometimes we see something coming where it's like, hey, maybe this asset's going to become obsolete or something like that, and we should go into something else.
Okay. So, as I been kind of researching you guys and seeing your portfolio, like we've been spending a lot of time on Centerra, but that is, one of many holdings you guys have. Next, I want to talk about is Union Station. I think everyone listening to this podcast, knows Union Station, has been through there probably numerous times. And you guys play a very key part in there. So I want to ask you I think it was like 12 years ago is when, maybe longer than that, Union Station started getting redeveloped. Like, what was it like at the time? And I believe you guys were not one of the original bids, but kind of like an 11th-hour visionary to the plan. Can you talk to us about that whole project?
Sure. So Denver Union Station had been a vision of Dana Crawford's for many, many years. I think it goes back all the way to her days at Larimer Square. And through the RFP process, she aligned herself with Larimer Associates, Ferd Bells, Walter, and Zach with Sage Hospitality. And they had a capital partner that wasn't fully aligned with them. And they were close to breaking ground. And I had met Zach Newmeyer at a Teach for America event. And I had mentioned that we were looking to grow our footprint in Denver and to keep me in mind if he comes across anything. And he called me up one day and he said, there's something really interesting that I think you'll be interested in. Can you meet me for breakfast? So I went to breakfast, and it was Jeff Hermanson, Walter Eisenberg, and Zach and me. And they just mentioned that they were looking to make a change with their capital partner. And would we be interested? And I talked to my brother Troy, and we said, yes, we're interested. And they said, how fast can you close? And I said, well, if for the right opportunity, we can close today. And I said, no, with all seriousness, we can move pretty quickly. And so we ended up putting together a deal within, I think, a week, and signed the lease with RTD and broke ground. And that partnership, working together, created Denver Union Station with RTD.
So what were because I know there were some original other plans, other bids for Union Station, because when I connected with your team at Realberry, they were very gracious, gave me and other investors a tour of it, so we got to learn so much. I think Ed was the gentleman's name, and he was just an amazing wealth of knowledge. Yeah. And it was so interesting, and he talked about some of I think one of the potential uses was an office building. It was very, very different than what it is today.
Yeah, there was plans at one point in time to tear it down. In fact, that's how Dana Crawford and John Hickenlooper created what was known as Save Our Station, SOS, because there was talk about tearing down Union Station, actually making a lake there and doing other things many, many years ago. And I think that ultimately everything flows to the vision, and the Union Station Alliance had a great vision, along with East-West Partners and Continuum, which did Union Station Neighborhood. And really together, that partnership with the feds and the state and the RTD and the city and everything really created something very special.
So can you paint us a picture, what was Union Station like, right before you closed on there? What was the condition of it? Because I know everyone sees the day and it's just, it's gorgeous, right? What was it like back then?
Yeah, it's interesting. Opening night, Dana Crawford got up and said, "Welcome to the Hood," and it was a different part of town. A lot of people didn't go to that part of town.
Yeah.
It needed some work, but I believe that success often comes to those who get in front of the inevitable. And you could see the Denver airport, the RTD bonds that were passed by the voters, and you could just see all the pieces coming together. And I actually thought we were late when we got involved. And everyone's like, you were so bold. And I'm like, I thought we were late.
Oh, you thought you were late to the party?
Oh, yeah, because, you had the Union Station neighborhood going, and you had the connection being built to Denver Airport. But there was still time for us to be involved. But I'm a futurist by nature, so it was very, like we talked about earlier when I got here, I believe if you're willing to look over long periods of time, it's not too difficult to figure out what, when, and where and how things are going to happen. Short term, it's a little harder. Yeah. But long term, I think when we started in real estate in 1990, I want to say the Front Range of Colorado had a population of 2 million people, maybe 2.2 million people. And then now there's, I think, a little over 5 million people. And by 2050, there's going to be 6.5 million people or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, I remember when I was starting, or when we were starting Centerra, and the population was 2 point some, and the forecasters said, over the next 25 years, it's going to go to 4 million. And as you're flying into the Denver airport and you look out and you see all that real estate, I'm like, wow, all that's going to get built once over, basically over the next 25 years. I'm like, we should get going. There's going to need to be apartments, and there's going to need to be homes and shopping centers. To me, it was very easy to see what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what's going to happen quarter to quarter and year to year, but I knew over 25 years we were going to basically double the growth in Colorado.
Well, let me ask you this, because I agree. Long-term vision makes sense, but we all know in real estate, you got to have cash along the way to live, survive. You got to, cover your debt. You got to cover your operating expenses, all that. So, how do you bridge these grand visions with, today's basis and just, a capital structure that allows you to have the cash flow and the growth you need for 10, 20, 30 years and take some curveballs?
Yeah, a lot of our capital comes from our own family and other high net worth families, and we're investing very long term. And so when we're focused long term, you just look at things differently. So when interest rates get low, we lock in long term financing. During the right before COVID, when rates got basically down to zero, I went to our team and said, lock everything you can, as long as you can. And I think while rates were near low, we locked about $1.7 billion of debt and financing.
Wow.
And if we were a short-term fund or something like that, you almost would never make that bet, because you typically want to sell real estate, unencumbered.
Yeah.
And we have properties today that still have financings in the 2.7% range for 40 years. Because we looked out and said, there's programs with HUD,
HUD loans,
HUD loans or FHA and stuff like that. And so it's just, I often say, if you want to create great investments and great places, don't always look at the developer, look at the source of capital. Because ultimately the source of capital is going to decide what happens. And fortunate for us, we're blessed to have about 300 investors that invest with us. And they are tend to be very long-term focused. And Warren Buffett says if you make an investment and you're not prepared for it to go down by 50% and hold it for at least 10 years, you have no business being an investor. I kind of think the same thing about real estate. I can't tell you what's going to happen, what Trump's going to do, or what's the Fed's going to do with interest rates over the next 1 or 2 years. But I can tell you that we're probably going to add 1 million to 2 million people on the Front Range of Colorado over the next 2 years. And based on that, we're going to need this many units of apartments, this many homes, et cetera, et cetera.
What type of LTC or LTV ranges do you shoot for? I get the, hey, fix out the debt as long as you can, but what's your LTV, LTC? Is it 65% or less, or are you less concerned about that?
It varies depending on what product type we're doing. And so I think Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad said there's good debt and bad debt.
Yep.
And bad debt is debt that you have to pay. Good debt is debt that someone else pays. So when it comes to buying land and stuff like that, we tend to like to have our land unencumbered, or at least very lowly levered. When it comes to financing a HUD 221 D4 apartment building, I'll take 100% financing, because you have no debt maturity for 30 some years, and as long as the investors in the project can service that debt on time, you have no gun to your head.
Yeah.
And so we try to be just very smart, and we try to, portfolio wide, I think we try to keep our debt around 50% to value. But you have to, every property you have to look at on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to loop back around to Union Station for a minute before we get just into general talk and shop about the market. So talk about the public-private partnership on that, because when I had the tour with Ed, he was talking, there's the, I don't know if balancing act is the right word, about I never stopped to think about, we got, luxury hotel, we got restaurants, we got all this. And plus we have contractual agreements with RTD or whatever different agencies are, so people can walk through for buses and trains. And it sounded very complex, to say the least, but just a really cool hybrid.
Yeah, it is complex, and it is a good example of how by working together we can all accomplish more than we can on our own. When RTD went out for bids, there was people that were willing to pay more economically. And we said we can't pay those type of rents, but we have a different vision. We want to make it, what we did is we surveyed the community, and what we heard was what the community didn't want. They're like, we don't want fast food chains. We don't want a bunch of out-of-town companies, stuff like that. We want a place to take our friends and family to, a place that we can hang out. And if you want to create a great place for tourists, start with creating a great place for locals. And so that was the big idea that we heard from the neighborhood. And then we hired a branding company to help us communicate this to our designers and to RTD. And what we heard from the branding company was your marching orders. What the community told you they wanted was to create the heart and soul of Denver. Your mission is to create the best of Colorado. It's real simple. And it was like, okay, cool. So we sat down with designers and said, we're designing the best of Colorado. And people like Pat McHenry and Joe Vostries and Jeff Hermanson and Walter Eisenberg and others, Dana Crawford, everyone working together, like, what can we do to make this the best of Colorado? And that was the goal. And so that's why we didn't put in a flagged hotel. We made it a boutique hotel, stuff like that.
And so, I mean, today there's all different, tenants and walks of life and businesses there at Union Station. Like, what do you guys run and operate? What don't you? Kind of give us a structure, like how the overarching Union Station works and what you guys are doing, either like involved in different aspects of managing it, or are you help operating the hotel? Like,
so Sage manages the hotel.
Okay.
City Street, formerly Larimer Associates, manages the captives and the retail leasing on the ground floor.
And these are just third party, just
a little bit of both. I think we operate 5. Our partnership with City Street operates 5 of the uses, and then we lease out 8 of the uses.
Okay.
And then Realberry is the managing partner of the partnership.
Okay. Now, I want to just kind of talk about your portfolio today, because I mean, I've looked at numerous times your website, but it spans mostly in Colorado. You got hospitality, multifamily, build to rent, mixed use, industrial, commercial, master plan communities. How the heck do you do all that? Like, it is impressive. And I want to sorry, I'll unpack that. I want to kind of talk about how you scale that, but at a high level, like, how do you determine what asset classes you get into, and just kind of your read on different asset classes around Colorado?
Yeah, it's a good question. My brother and I tend to be more generalist, and then we have sharpshooters in every field.
Okay.
And so we have a gentleman that leads and does nothing but hotels. We have someone that wakes up every day and just does apartments. We've done 4,000 or 5,000 units of apartments. We have someone that wakes up every day and just does large-scale master plan communities. Someone that does just industrial. So we try to find people that are experts in their craft or their field, and then support them with capital, with overhead, with structure, and things like that.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now, how did you choose to get in those asset classes? Is it just opportunistic, or are you just looking at the trends like, hey, based on this location, where the trends are going, this is where the puck's going?
Yeah, it's really what's the highest and best use for each piece of property. And then, when you do a master plan community or something like that, things are going to change. So you want to make sure we have a lot of flexibility. And, before the GFC, for rent was not, there wasn't much of it, and everything was for sale.
Yeah.
And the GFC hit, and then everything switched to for rent. And so you want to make sure you can adapt and that we can stay true to the vision and the mission of each MPC. And then
NPC?
The master plan community. Oh. But then as we're doing that, if we feel that maybe we're not an expert at something, we'll joint venture. Okay. So really, we just look at it on a case-by-case basis.
So, with the broad portfolio you have, right, we're recording this in 2026. The market's changed a lot the last 4 years. Like, I guess what's gone really well and what's been more challenging than you anticipated, right? Like, hey, multifamily is very tough right now, right? I think that's across the board for everyone. I'd be kind of curious, like, how your multifamily portfolio is doing, and just general commentary on other asset classes. How are those performing in today's market, both from the macro trends and our Colorado trends?
Yeah, I would say generally home building sales are good. They're not great, but they're good. Apartments have been tough because the market got overbuilt, but you can already see we have a shortage coming. To find land, design it, entitle it, permit it, finance it, build it, stabilize it, open it, can take 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
And so we had this huge wave of multifamily supply that came, especially after COVID. And then the market did get overbuilt. And then you can see now that we think the peak of the market was really Q4 of last year.
As far as supply coming online?
Yeah. Q4, we had the peak of the supply hit in Q4 of 25. We're going to absorb most of that supply through this year. And you can see, because these things take so long, you can actually see that we're going to have a supply-demand imbalance starting in middle of 27 into 28 and 29.
You think that's when we'll start flipping again?
Yep. Well, that's when we will have more demand than we're delivering supply. And so what will happen is, as concessions go from 3 months to 2 months to 1 month, you don't realize that, a lot of people don't realize that when we put those concessions in place, as they come off, in addition to inflation, you pick up a little over 8% for every month of concessions you take away.
Yeah.
And so I think as we're looking out over the next 3 to 4 years, I think because of the lack of new supply coming and the concessions coming down, we're going to see some pretty good rent growth starting in 27 into 28 and 29.
Okay. So have you started seeing concessions come down in your properties? Do you think multifamily, do you think they've peaked and now they're starting to come down?
First occupancy has to increase, and we've just seen that. So occupancy, dropped down into the low 90s. Now it's back up to the mid 90s. So as a result, we're just starting to see concessions start to come down right now.
Okay.
Not a lot, but a little bit. But you can just forecast out, and I mean every market's a little different. But generally speaking, everyone's kind of been doing 2 to 3 months of concessions. Where in back when things were really hot, we were doing no concessions or maybe a week or two.
Yeah. All right. So you thinking around 27, maybe going to 28. We'll
mid 27 through 28 and 29, you're going to see some pretty significant growth. And then what's going to happen is people are going to go, oh, it's time to build apartments again. But then to design them, permit them, get them ready, et cetera, is going to take a few years. It's hard to forecast unless you're looking really long term, much beyond about 3 years, just from supply and demand standpoint. But from what we're seeing today, mid 27 through 29 should be some pretty good rent growth years.
Now, do you think, Denver County specific, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and stated that, affordability portion into a lot of developers and building. Have you seen the Denver landscape be harder than the broader landscape, or are you that granular with the projects?
I support affordable and attainable housing. It's very important. And at the end of the day, we just, as developers, we work on margin. So if something costs, $1, we need to make sure when we open it, it's worth $1.20 or whatever. And so as inclusionary zoning and stuff like that takes place, that's fine, but then someone's got to pay for it. And it's hard to do that when you've got declining rents and increased concessions and stuff like that. So that's why a lot of stuff's not getting built. But as the market comes back, that'll get factored in. It's a level playing field for everyone. And in essence, it gets built into everyone's rent.
I'd like to get your commentary on just, Colorado specific, right? The last, 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of new laws have been passed at the Colorado level. A lot have, made it more difficult for, landlords and housing providers and businesses, right? Just, more rules and regulations for, the good intent of making sure that, people have good, safe, housing, attainable housing, all that stuff. But right, it's a pendulum, right? How, if any, has those new laws impacted projects you guys are doing or current projects you're managing, or just any kind of thoughts in general with the new legislation that's been passed and where things are going?
Yeah, I would just, if there's any legislators listening, I think a lot of some of the proposed legislation has been well-intentioned. I think people generally have good intentions. But practically speaking, like, for example, there was legislation that said when a developer is going to sell a project, the local community has the right of first refusal to buy it. Well, the problem when you give someone a right of first refusal, there's a whole bunch of bidders that are like, hey, I'm not going to take all this time, put our team on it, underwrite the property, do all this work to find out that someone can just come in and outbid us.
Yep.
And so, again, well-intentioned. I understand why people are doing that. But I would just encourage legislators and others to really look at partnering with the building community. Like we don't have much for sale condo development going on across the whole state. And why is that? Because you're almost guaranteed to get sued.
Not many people have it.
Yeah, and it's not economical.
Yeah.
And so developers like us and others just say we're just not going to do it. So what happens is you have this huge lack of supply. And again, the legislation is well intentioned, but if something's not producing the results that are intended, maybe it's time to take a look at why.
I do a lot of investing here in Colorado, out of state, and a lot as an LP, as a credit investor, right? And some sponsors and GPs I know who are doing, bigger projects, vertical multifamily, and they're, here in Denver, here in Colorado Springs. They said the last couple of years, a lot of outside capital, outside of Colorado, institutional, family office type capital, their appetite for Colorado has greatly diminished with how the laws have, changed the last couple of years. I'm curious, I don't play in that space, right? You've got bigger connections than I do. Have you seen from the national level and bigger money, have you seen their interest in Colorado change or their appetite change because of the laws?
We have. And I will say we and I am still very big believers in Colorado.
Yeah.
With that being said, whether it's the laws that have passed or the proposed laws that are going to pass, it sends a signal. And I tend to be a free market person, have very strict standards and things like that, but let the free market system work. And so I think part of it is proposed legislation, and the other part of it is what that proposed legislation, the signal it sends to the investing community. We have heard from a variety of capital sources that they just said, hey, Denver, we're Colorado, we're timeout right now. We're going to see how things shake out politically and stuff like that. So again, I think everyone means well, and the more that the legislative community and the governmental entities can work with the development community. And again, we work on margin. We're open book. To get capital, debt, and equity, we have to make a certain return, and we're happy to sit down with you and say, when you do this, and it drives up cost blank, we have to raise our rents by blank, and if we can't raise our rents by blank, we're not going to build it. I mean, it's just simple laws of economics.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, because I love talking to visionaries. I love talking to, obviously, you're ingrained in the local community here in Colorado. You're very bullish on Colorado, the growth. Obviously, you're doing a lot here. Like, where do you see the opportunities right now in Colorado, and where do you see the growth go over the next 5 or 10 years? Yeah,
even though growth has slowed in Colorado on a percentage basis, I'll give you an example. In northern Colorado, someone had mentioned to me, they said, why should we invest up there? It's growth has slowed. And I said, it has slowed, but it's a lower percentage on a bigger base.
Yep.
And I said, when you factor in the bigger base, even though the percentage growth is lower on a pure number standpoint, we're going to add 20,000 more people than the same period before. And they were like, oh, I didn't understand it that way. And
so, while the growth is happening up north.
It is. Right now, I think over half of all of new growth in Colorado is Lerner and Weld.
Yeah.
And I'd say, I think 2/3 of that's Weld and 1/3 of it's Lerner. Okay. So, we're very bullish on it. I think very bullish on multifamily housing. We need more housing, all types of housing, to make sure that as the market comes back, we don't get into rents that people can't afford. And we need to focus on job growth.
Where do you see the opportunity in multifamily? Are you seeing distressed opportunities to buy? Are you starting to build mortgages and buy at a low basis? Hey, we're going to build in 3 years and come in at a low supply wave.
Yeah, we've looked at a number of deals right now. There's not huge distress in the market. You can buy some stuff at replacement cost, maybe a little bit below or a little bit above. But I think getting land entitled, getting things designed, getting permits ready. So because when we develop these master plan communities, like I mentioned, baseline will include about 10,000 homes. Centerra will have about 10,000 homes. We have to look many years in advance. And so we will go in and design the next 5 or 10 industrial buildings, the next 500 lots of housing, et cetera, and get everything ready. Doesn't mean we start construction on it, but we get everything ready. So as the market turns, we don't have to go spend a couple years and do all that work. And so I see a huge opportunity to continue to stick to the vision. Again, we look out, we see what's going to happen with growth and supply and demand, get everything ready, and then we wait. And like in our master plan communities, once an industrial building gets to 50% leased, we start the next one and we'll spec it.
Okay.
For industrial, you always want to make sure you have some level of spec space, because when a tenant comes in, they look for existing space first. If not, then they go build something.
Okay. So I want to talk about some changes that you guys have. The company going from McWhinney to Realberry, and also you're broadening your capital base as well. Because I connected with your team, Liz specifically, at the Passapocket Summit 2 months ago or 3 months ago now here in Denver. And she's telling me about the portfolio. She's telling me about how you guys are building a new platform. You rebranded. You're doing more stuff in the accredited investor space. Can you just tell us about the rebrand and what your vision is for bringing more investments to more people?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking the question. I think we have built our investor base off of a group of investors that have been with us for many years. Some of them for 30 some years, and success often comes to those who get in front of the inevitable.
Yes.
Normally, people that invest in real estate have to do it directly, have to have a certain net worth and write a certain size check, et cetera. And we think that real estate is going to get tokenized. Everything is going to go on chain. And if someone wanted to invest in Denver Union Station historically, if say they wanted to put $25,000 or $50,000 in Denver Union Station, they usually don't know how to get a hold of us. And if they did, we wouldn't know how to handle that type of volume with that low of a check. And so they would typically go to their advisor, who would direct them into some type of real estate fund, who sometimes does a fund to fund, and that fund may come back to Realberry. And so there's fees and promotes and carry and everything being paid along the way to lots of different people. And what should be a 15 to 20% return ends up being an 8 or 9% return because of all the different people involved. And so we believe that what's going to happen is as things go on chain and become digitized, and Congress passes legislation, which they're doing right now, to make it where if someone wants to invest directly in Denver Union Station, they should be able to contact Realberry if we have an investment available, and do that digitally online with a proven sponsor, et cetera. So it's not here today, but it's coming quickly. And I think in the next couple years, definitely as we get closer to probably 28, 29, 30, you're going to see that happen.
I got so many things I want to unpack there with you, Chad. So, initially I got a lot of excitement when I talked to Liz, because we talked a lot of real estate, and a lot of your capital is coming from, qualified investors, right? That's usually bigger, higher net worth investors than accredited investors are. And there's different rules about all that stuff. So, it's usually only open to qualified investors, and, accredited investors, don't have access to deals like that. So I love that you're stepping down that space. I did not realize that you're building the infrastructure to go to some type of tokenization in the future. That's where the puck's going in your view. I
think it is, and I talked to Mike Johnston, mayor of Denver, and we were working on a public-private partnership on something. He's like, you know what? I wish that as we go into these communities and sometimes things get gentrified, et cetera, I wish people in the community could actually invest in what's going on in those projects. And maybe it's not a lot, maybe it's $20, maybe it's $100, et cetera. And that's coming, like through tokenization and blockchain and stuff like that. And we think there's a big opportunity for us, because as we do these public-private partnerships, could you imagine being able to go to a local community and say we're getting tax increment financing or fee waivers or things like that, and there's a certain percentage of the capital raised that's left and made available for people in the community if they want to. They don't have to, but if they want to invest.
Oh, that'd be super cool. And they could invest a small amount and not be accredited, right? Because that's they're not going to throw in $100,000.
Correct. And we think that actually changes people's lives. I mean, to give. Typically the real estate investing has been kind of reserved for the top 1%. When that changes and average people are able to invest efficiently with proven sponsors in their communities with public-private partnerships, that's the true full circle flywheel, if you will. And you can technically do that today, but it's a very labor-intensive manual process. If we were to go get thousands of investors and K1s and all that stuff manually, it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
All that's getting ready to become digitized, and it's not here yet, but it's coming, and we're getting everything ready for that.
How many years until you think that? I think
well, the Clarity Act and the Genius Act and everything are being finalized now in Congress. I think that that'll get approved this year, and then that'll be the legislation. And I think that will start to get rolled out, over the next couple of years and come, 29, 2030. And one of our investors said to me, like, I invested, I'm just making numbers up. I invested $1 million in this deal, and now it's worth $2 million. And then you have this new deal, and I'd like to put $500,000 in that deal. I wish I could just take part of my $2 million investment I made here and do that. And manually you can without selling the asset. But I was meeting with David Sachs years ago, who is a tech entrepreneur and was our crypto czar under Trump. And this was back in like 2017 or 2018. I remember he grabbed his phone and he goes, Chad, in the future, he goes, give me an example of an asset. I go, Denver Union Station. He goes, great. How many investors do you have? And I said, I think we have 35, 40 investors in Denver Union Station. He goes, great. And let's assume that I invested $1. Now it's worth $3. And I decide I want to sell $1 of my investment. How does it work? I'm like, well, I got to get an attorney involved. We have to amend the PPM. And he goes, how much does that cost? I'm like, it probably costs like $30,000. It takes like 60 days. He goes, you're going to do it with a click of your button. He goes, trust me, it's coming. It's not here yet. But that was all the way back in 2017. I still have notes from my meeting on that.
Well, he had a startup that was trying to do token commercial real estate, right?
Yeah, so all that.
At that time, he was...
Yep,
okay.
yeah. So he could see it, and him and John Herring and others could really see what was getting ready to happen. And it's all coming to fruition.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, profit tends to flow to those who add the most value, the most perceived value. And I see you shaking your head right now. Everyone agrees that makes sense.
Yep.
But, if you wanted to do 50 grand, again, you would go here and you would go here and you would go here. And eventually it makes its way back to us. And there's lots of fees and lots of promotes and lots of people in the middle that you're not being given the same opportunity as the top 1%.
Yeah.
And that's unfair. And that's going to change. And especially as we do a lot of public-private partnerships, we hear a lot from politicians like, hey, as we give you community dollars and fee waivers and tax increment financing, et cetera, I hear it time and time again, I wish people in the local community could invest in these projects.
So with a tokenization, would that be almost some type of like Reg A type fund where people can invest credit, or would that be totally separate?
No, it'll be both. You'll see Reg A, you'll see Reg D. It's more about getting the technology's been created.
Okay.
Getting the legislation passed, getting the rules written. Everyone's got to get their systems changed over. But I mean, we've been talking about this since 2016, 2017, 2018. You can see it all happening now. You've got Jamie Dimon, you've got all these people talking about what's coming. Let's just fast forward 5 years from now. We're going to say, I remember 1997 with the dial-up modem. Right.
I remember those days.
And the little AOL thing, and then just even in 4 or 5 years past that, what happened? Same thing's getting ready to happen with tokenization and blockchain and digital.
So you're seeing that trend. You're building the infrastructure. So when the time comes, you've got the distribution, you've got the infrastructure in place. You'll be able to handle the at scale and do it so much more efficiently.
Yeah, and I think it really is going to change communities. It's just going to change how people live, because it's very difficult to do high quality placemaking with short-term institutional capital. And I would just say, look at the 16th Street Mall in Denver and look at Lodo. Why is Lodo generally so much better than other parts of Denver? You've got the Montfords, you've got East-West Partners, you have Continuum, you have Union Station, you have Dairy Block. Up until recently, you had Larimer Square. So you had all these families that really, really care about downtown Denver and Colorado, and we're putting our heart and soul into these properties day in and day out. And we were able to do that because we have long-term aligned, in most cases, capital. Yeah. And then you go to other parts of town where all this real estate got put in funds. It's short-term driven. And it's who pays the highest rent, and they're not really thinking about the ground floor and how does the ground floor work with everything above it, et cetera. It's very, Phil Anschutz gave one of his public interview years ago when it was about buying the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, and if I remember correctly, he said the problem with real estate today is it's become very, and I'm paraphrasing, very institutionalized. And he said, if you look at the great places of the world, the great places of society, they weren't created by banks and they weren't created by financial institutions. They were created by families and patriarchs and people that had a vision, and they worked that vision day in and day out. And it's interesting, go back to I grew up in Southern California, and you have Don Brenn with the Irvine Company, you have the Segerstroms with South Coast Plaza, you have the Moiso family with Rancho Mission Viejo, et cetera. And these are people that started very early on, and today these places are thriving. And then you go to other parts of Orange County, and there's billboards everywhere, and it's just chopped up, and malls are being torn down. The Westminster Mall, I was actually born in Anaheim, but grew up in Westminster as a kid. That mall got torn down. And look at most major malls that were developed in call it the 70s and 80s by Wall Street. Not all of them, but a large portion of them have all failed.
Yep.
But look at the malls that were done by families in the 70s and 80s, like South Coast Plaza and like Fashion Island, et cetera, that they're thriving. And consumers are very smart. They know when capital really authentically cares about them, and they know when you're trying to cut corners. And it's like an energy that they can feel. And so I think this is going to completely change the way that communities are built, because, and I see you shaking your head, I'm shaking my head, like every individual investor goes, that makes total sense. But the problem is, when the money gets into Wall Street and these funds traditionally, and it's IRR, short term, I call it death by 1,000 cuts. It works for a little bit, and then you wake up one day and you're like, man, 16th Street Mall in Denver used to be cool. Well, what happened? You can shoot a cannon through, and we got 50% vacancy. Why? And then Cherry Creek's full, right? And you've got a couple developers in Cherry Creek that really are long-term family capital. They care about it. They're working that real estate day in and day out. And it's not death by 1,000 cuts. It's, I go in the office every day and I say, what can we do to add value to our real estate and our people today? If we were short term, I'd be like, what can we cut today to juice EBITDA?
Yeah.
so we can sell and get a higher whatever. And it's gonna transform, I believe, when individual investors with their pocketbook have the ability to invest in their community directly, like what's typically been reserved for the top 1%. It's going to transform the way communities are developed and how people live. And the reality is, we've been able to show that over time we actually make more money with our model than the death by 1,000 cuts model. But we need aligned capital that's willing to look long term.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
Chad, this has been so refreshing to hear your perspective really on 2 things, right? Because real estate investing right now, the sentiment is not positive, generally speaking, right now, at least for a lot of small investors. But hearing kind of your bullishness on Colorado, where things are going, and hearing the vision of how you want to build a platform so to say the average everyday person can invest in real estate. I'm a big pro. Hey, the more people that own a little bit of the S&P 500, we should have more of that. And the fact, hey, people can own a big building in their backyard or whatever, for $50, $100, I think that is amazing. I love that vision. So this is the first of at least a handful of podcasts we'll be doing with you and the Realberry team, because I know I've talked to Liz, I've talked to some team members there. You guys have been gracious to give access to some of your subject matter experts you talked about. I know doing some property walks around town, since we're also Colorado centric. I really appreciate your time, and I'm really excited to do just a deeper dive into learning about it, and also walking some cool properties with you that you built. Yeah,
my pleasure. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being a voice, and look forward to being back.
Thank you so much, Chad.
Thanks.